Hello and welcome to Emergency Preparedness 101. I'm Marcos Gonzalez and this is my final presentation, so let's go ahead and get things started. A lot of people often ask, why should I be prepared? I don't think any severe disasters or emergencies happen in my area. I live in a pretty safe part of the area. Well, that's not always true. Every place in the United States is susceptible to some sort of either natural disaster, man-made disaster, or just general emergency. And it's important to be prepared for anything that comes your way. You're always better off the more you know, and the more you're able to prepare yourself for these situations. So whether it be a fire or a hurricane or a tornado or a blizzard condition or a flood or anything like that, you should always be prepared for whatever you encounter. So I've pretty much broken it down into 3 easy steps to become prepared for any type of emergency. Ready.gov also breaks it down into similar steps. So I'm just gonna kind of touch on what they say and elaborate a little bit more, and kind of talk about some experiences. So the 3 steps we're going to be just pretty much become a well-informed and educated citizen, make a plan, and then prepare and build an emergency kit. So the first step is going to be really to just inform and educate yourself. Really, education is the key to everything. And it's important that you know the hazards and dangers of your area, and pretty much what you're susceptible to. It's really not a great idea to kind of live in not knowing what's going to happen to your area. It's better to just have a better idea of whether you're susceptible to fire or flood or tornadoes or hurricanes or anything like that, for the place that you live. And it's also important to understand how the different hazards and disasters really can affect you and your family. Each of these disasters really affects different people different ways, but they kind of affect everybody generally in the same certain ways depending on how severe the disaster is. So for example, let's just take whether it's a fire or a blizzard event or a flood or anything like that. Disasters often affect these different factors, such as if it's a fire, like we saw in Los Alamos in 2000 and 2011, the city was essentially just gridlocked due to the traffic from the evacuation. I mean, you've got 15,000 people trying to leave that little town. So you've got to be able to plan for that and take that into consideration if you're trying to evacuate. You're going to hit a lot of traffic backup. Another thing that's often going to be affected is blackouts, whether it be for electricity, natural gas, internet, cell phone service. These systems often do go down in the event of an emergency, depending on where it occurs, or even just shut down as a precaution. So you have to be able to work around that. Have flashlights, have extra batteries. Be aware that you will probably lose electricity in the event of a disaster. And another big thing that often affects everybody is, loss of fresh water, loss of food. When you look at Hurricane Katrina or the floods that we've had in this state, like in Ruidoso or in Hatch or different things like that, their drinking water supplies, their food supplies are often contaminated. So it's best to be prepared for that and, keep extra water, fresh water, keep food in a dry area that's not going to get contaminated. That way you and your family can survive. And another thing I didn't list on here, which is going to be air quality. In 2011, when we had the Wallow fire burning in eastern Arizona, we had the Las Conchas fire, we had several other little smaller fires burning all around that region in June and July of 2011. We saw some very extreme air quality conditions. You got to figure, the Wallow fire was burning eastern side outside of Reserve, New Mexico, so just west of that into Arizona. That was burning close to 500,000 acres. They were experiencing tough smoke and tough ash all the way as far north as Taos and Raton. So you got to figure you may not be necessarily close to the fire, but you're still going to experience the effects of the smoke and the ash. So you have to be prepared for that. You don't always have to be prepared for just the immediate danger. You got to remember, big disasters, big events often affect people hundreds and hundreds of miles away. So that's definitely something to take into consideration and think about as well. So the second step is going to be to plan for an emergency. Planning is definitely a big thing that people don't take into consideration and don't think about. So the first thing I definitely want to touch on is going to be make sure you make an evacuation plan, whether it's from just basically evacuating from your house because it's on fire or because there's carbon monoxide inside, or if you have to evacuate your entire neighborhood and city because something's going on. Um, after 2011, people in Los Alamos are really starting to take this to consideration. People in California really work on it hard because of the imminent fire danger that they have. Places that are below the floodplain definitely have to think about that too, because in the event that those levees break, you got to be able to get out of that area quickly. So really, just knowing what your evacuation route is going to be, how to get there, and then you have to remember to take into consideration the traffic delays, road blockages. The disaster may have compromised certain bridges or roadways or things, so you have to be able to divert and work around those. And the biggest thing I definitely stress is have a meeting place for your entire family, whether it's away or you have several different designated meeting spots depending on where the disaster is. And you got to say, if it's on this side of town, on the opposite side of town, at this gas station, we're going to have a meeting place. And this is just so in the event that your family is separated because of work or evacuation policies or something like that, you all can be reunited at a certain place with a loss of cell phone service or a loss of electricity because you can't actually physically call someone. So everybody knows where to go. It's easy to reunite somebody in a situation like that. And another huge thing which I have to stress is really know what to do in the event of an emergency. And it all goes back to training and drills and exercises and things that you can do with your family or your governments or your schools or different things like that to really make sure everybody's prepared for these disasters. So for instance, if you've got an active shooter or a tornado or something like that that's really going to threaten where you are, a shelter in place or a hide under the desk type thing is really going to be the best solution versus where if you've got a fire or a flood or a hurricane, evacuation is really the only way to move around that. So really you just need to know in what situation which is the best method, whether it's going to be evacuation or shelter in place or really just do nothing, just stay inside or just don't even take it into consideration. Really, you just need to make sure you know that and what to do in those situations. Um, I used to do a lot of work with the Santa Fe Public School District with their emergency planning, and in every single classroom in the school district, they have a document with several pages that outlines, okay, if this happens, we shelter in place. If this happens and this starts to happen, we evacuate. If none of these happens, we're just on lockdown. All these different variations of what could possibly go wrong on just a blanket document that shows the teachers and staffs exactly what to do. And I think that's very smart and extremely important. And then my third step, which I'm really going to stress on, is going to be to build an emergency kit. And these kits, a lot of people think, oh, it's the apocalypse, I'm building to the end of the world. Not necessarily. It's just something for you and your family to have in the event that there's an emergency where you either have to evacuate or you lose power or something happens that you don't have all your regular amenities available to you. So really what you want to do is you want to build a customized emergency kit for you and your family that will contain at least 72 hours worth of supplies. Now that includes your food, which should be non-perishables. You're going to be your water, paper towels, a map or something like that, an emergency radio, definitely flashlights with extra batteries, all these different things which will help you in the event that you don't have electricity, you can't leave your house, you're at an evacuation center or on the road getting there and you need food or water or different things like that. So you kind of have your basic stuff like food and water and a first aid kit and different things like that in your basic items in your emergency kit. But a few things I want to stress, kind of a little bit more advanced items, is definitely to have your any kind of prescription medicines that you or your family take at least have 5 to 6 days in that emergency kit. Now the reason I say 5 to 6 versus 3 days is because in the event that you are on your way to an evacuation center or at an evacuation center that doesn't have an established medical system yet because it's still early stages of the disaster, you want to definitely be able to have enough prescription to keep going until that stuff is established or till somebody can get you that. Not necessarily just 3 days and you're there, but then you don't have your medicines with you. So that's definitely something to keep in consideration. Different things like a fire extinguisher, an emergency radio, your glasses or contacts that you make sure you want to have an extra set of, a couple other things like that. Just you may not need them, but it's nice to have them when you have them. And a definite thing I think every emergency kit should have is some cash, whether it be money, cashier checks, or money orders, sorry, cashier checks, or actual physical cash. It's extremely important to have that with you in the time of an emergency. If you need to get somewhere, if you need to pay for gas, if you need an emergency hotel room, anything like that, it's extremely important to have that money in the event that you forget your wallet. Now, any of these items in your emergency kit should never be tapped into just because you're out of something in the house and you don't feel like going to the store, or you need extra money to make a bill payment or something like that. You really shouldn't ever tap into them. And if you do tap into them, make sure you replenish them the very next day. And for certain things like prescriptions, for certain types of foods that you put in your emergency kit, depending on the type of batteries you have, you should definitely keep maintaining them and replenishing them on a regular basis, at least once every 3 to 4 months, to make sure everything's in proper working order, nothing's expired, different things like that. So that's extremely important to keep in mind. So, a lot of people ask, why these tips? Why are they important? Why should I prepare? I'm okay. I'm perfectly prepared the way it is. And I feel it's important to be prepared for every single and any situation out there possible. It's extremely tough when you're thrown into an emergency and you don't have the necessary stuff to make sure your family's safe and comfortable. Preparation is the key for a successful outcome for every single emergency. So if you're well prepared, you've got an emergency kit, you have an evacuation plan, you're less likely to be injured, you're more likely to be reunited with your family, and everybody's going to be a lot happier at the end of the day than if you didn't have any of those things. Your family's separated, you don't have food, you don't have water, you don't know what's going on, you don't have any money. Just being a little bit prepared goes a long way. And I feel that all public health practitioners, government employees, whether it's state, local, city, um, public school district employees, fire, police, EMS personnel, hospital workers, I think they all should not only focus on these tips for themselves, but really convey these to the public, because this is extremely important knowledge. Everything's really just a ticking time bomb. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when. And the better prepared you are, the better off you'll be in the long run. So here's just a real quick example of the different types of preparedness. I feel that preparedness is the difference between a lost home and a saved home. I was out on the Las Conchas wildfire in 2011. We saw a lot of destruction with houses, but one of them really caught my eye. The picture on your right is a family who was well prepared. They knew that they were up against a wildfire season. They knew what it could do. They made sure they kept a defensible space around their house free of shrubs and excess wood and stuff like that. They knew their evacuation routes. They got all their valuables out of the house. And they also did one extra step. They bought a system for their home that actually protects it with a special gel that repels and cools the house, repels the heat. That's just how far they were prepared for a fire season. You look at the pictures on the left, these people weren't so prepared. Unfortunately, they lost several houses on this exact same street, but they just weren't as prepared. They didn't take the fire threat seriously. They didn't prepare their homes for defensible space. They didn't have the special gel or anything like that at their leisure or at their convenience. So it's really just how well prepared you are for the situation can completely change the outcome of what you experience. So that's going to be my presentation. I thank you all. It's been a great class. My references are going to be on this final page right here. So I thank you all for your time.